developing your people. There's nothing better than watching someone show up in an entry-level position and then work up to supervisor or work up to, management. For the guests and the team would be that's the rewarding part.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Moments That Matter podcast, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the pivotal moments that have shaped the journeys of today's leaders. I'm your host, Jason Crepero, and in each episode, we explore an industry leader and their unique story and the series of moments that have defined their path. Today, we're diving in with Andre Giannandrea, who is general manager of the Post Hotel in beautiful Lake Louise, Canada. Andre, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you, Jason?
Doing great. For those who may not know you, your past, you in general, or the Post Hotel or that area, can you give everyone just a quick intro for you and your role?
Sure. Like Jason mentioned, my name is Andre Giannandrea, currently the general manager at the Post Hotel in Lake Louise. Grew up not far from Lake Louise in Banff, Alberta, born and raised there. My dad immigrated to Banff when he was 19 and never left, still in Banff, and he is still with us, but very entrepreneurial. Was in hospitality and everything from a taxi company to a gas station, and eventually a Sheraton hotel, which is what launched me into the hotel business.
Fantastic. And so you and I actually we met at BITEC a couple of years ago, and I do a lot of speaking. So we will often buy a sponsorship and I talk. And recently, for the past year and a half, anyone that'll listen, I talk about storytelling. And it's really important because I remember people based on the stories they tell. And I remember your dad, landing and trying to go to Toronto and taking the train all the way out to Banff, right? And then you spending so many years on the force. And so the stories matter, and you're just burned into my mind forever because of these awesome stories. So you originally went into hospitality, but then spent 15 years on the police force up there. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, growing up in the family business as a young kid, you're doing the frontline jobs that your parents have for you in their business, like pumping gas at their gas station, helping mom clean rooms at the motel, just jobs like that you would do in high school. Right out of high school, started as a reserve police officer, did that for the first 3-4 years, and then went on as a regular an hour and a half from here in Calgary with the Calgary Police Service, and that was started in 1997. By then, like I mentioned, my dad's path there, like Jason mentioned, he ended up in Banff by mistake, took the wrong train, and ended up carving out a nice existence for himself. In 2004, I was approached by one of his partners in the Sheraton hotel. What was happening there is he was buying out his partners. Very amicable transaction. The three of them were friends. One of them was a member of parliament, which is your equivalent of a congressman down in the south of the border, who wasn't supposed to have business holdings, but they all do because that's just what they do. And the other one just wanted to retire. So he was buying the two of them out. During that time, his health created some challenges for him. And then also in the due diligence of the purchase, came out that the general manager had been doing a very significant fraud, forging signatures, and put the hotel in a bit of a crisis situation. So my initial thought when I approached to this is, I was upset, of course, that this was happening, and he's telling me about all the problems and how they got to fix it and how they got to lead it. And I kept wondering, why is he telling me this? Because it wasn't my dad telling me this. Was one of his partners.
You were the chosen one, and you were just finding out about it.
Yeah, well, he flew out from Ontario and met me. I was working, came and met me in a coffee shop. And as he was telling me the story, I still kept, like I said, I'm not sure. I don't know if he was just delivering the bad news that the business was in trouble, dad's life work, or turned out he was tapping me on the shoulder, and he told me, "This is, you're the guy." And I told him, when I left there, that hotel was a grass field. When I went off to training, that's how much as I know about the hotel business. And so I took a leave of absence to jump in and help to run those. So I went from being an officer to being the general manager of a Sheraton fairly within a matter of weeks. And it was walked into Revenue Canada audits, which would be like your RS. We were at the tail end of the agreement with the Sheraton franchise. We had a very toxic work culture because of what was going on there, and banks pounding on the door, and was just the to-do list was endless, and it was a to-do list of crisis. It wasn't, and at the same time, that was arrived there in April and right before the high season. So now we're coming into May is when it really gets crazy for the summer. So we're at the same time days away, literally, from having a full hotel full of guests to deal with. So that's what I walked into. Is that's my first exposure to the hospitality business.
Wow. I have not heard it said that way. So, what do? You just, what type of framework or,
Well, I
thoughts were
started.
running through your mind,
Well,
prioritizing?
I started with just interacting with the team one by one, trying to see where the challenges were, where my strengths, where my weaknesses were upon the team. Reached out to the bank and let them know that I'm there and that I'm tackling the issues, and found out what it is they need from me to come, so we can come up with a bit of an action plan. And they were receptive because, from what they've been dealing with, uh, he concealed his fraud by not paying the bills and the things like that. So started there, reached out to the brand, Sheraton, and told them the predicament and who I was and why I'm there. And they put me on to a couple of mentors, one being a general manager of a hotel at the Westin up in Edmonton, who I'm still in contact with, and kind of took me under his wing as a first time leader in the hotel space, especially in that branded family, and then started organizing to attend their training sessions and just, essentially just made a to-do list and started tackling it. Is kind of the short story. The Reader's
Wow.
Digest of it. So
How long after you took over to when you finally got it to a place where you felt like it, it could just kind of run without being in crisis mode?
I would put that between the 18 and 24-month mark. It was the first year was a bit of a blur. It was just working through the crisis and kind of, and you make your mistakes as a new leader too, right? Is focusing on experience versus attitude, and
Hmm.
maybe also transitioning from policing to hospitality. I was trying to change my approach on how I communicate and how I solve problems. So uh, actually, so I was certain individuals that needed to be held accountable, uh, got away with things longer than they should have. I know that sounds strange coming from a policeman, but I kept, I took the approach of coach and correct and talk, and we were past that point. Certain people just needed to be moved along, but they survived longer than they should have. So, you make your fails and your successes along the way too.
Hmm. So going back to this guy tapping you, you had a choice, right? You could have said no. What was it about this opportunity or seizing the moment here that made you think maybe I could do this? Maybe I should do this? Was there a sense of duty to help out?
That's well put. I think part of it was a sense of duty, family obligation. And my dad arrived with, he didn't have anything when he arrived in Canada, and he built up his businesses, and he had this Sheraton hotel and was at risk of losing all that. And um, so I think it's safe to say I felt a bit of a sense of obligation, but a sense of duty. And that's why at the same time, I was still grappling with my passion, which was policing at the time, and that obligation. That's why I didn't resign. I went and uh, sought out my options, and they said, "Well, you can take a leave of absence for family reasons," and they held my position, which gave
Huh.
me a little comfort. I thought, well, if I stink at this, I can always come back, or if it doesn't end well, I could always go back. So my intention was to go in, deal with this, and then go back. My intention wasn't at the time to leave.
But you didn't have to relocate. So where you were policing and where the hotel was, this the same community?
No, they're an hour apart. So the city of Calgary is where I was policing, which is a city of just over 1 million people, and Canmore is next to Banff and Lake Louise, community of about 10,000, about an hour away. But no, I didn't have to physically move across the country or anything, so that was good. It was relatively close by.
Wow. In hindsight now, are there any attributes or characteristics, skills learned as a police officer in training and had to kind of be out there in the streets that served you well actually in leadership at the hotels? Or did you have to start from scratch?
No, I was that was one thing that came as a surprise to me is how many uh, skills were transferable. And I was asked about this time last year when I was joining the post for the first time, is people always want to hear the story. I mean, I've gone on to get my MBA, and they've asked me to come and give talks about transition and tell my story of going from policing to business and whatnot. But I've only been asked once now, twice now, because of you, how that how that helped me. And it was, you're reading situations quickly, reading people quickly, making quick decisions, knowing when someone's lying to you, quite frankly, and walking into walking into the unknown, right? I didn't know who this team was. I didn't know who I was. So policing treats you that. You're forever walking up to people you don't know and having to deal with situations, forever having to adjust your communication style quickly, forever having to read the landscape. And those things have actually served me very well in hospitality, and especially in situations where you're trying to change culture or deal with bad habits and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool though too, because I feel like you come in with like this extra level of intrigue and like, hey, I've been on the force. People want to talk to you about that. Do you find that most people, once they learn that, they want to talk more about it, and you might not be wanting to talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like I mean, I'm very proud of that chapter in my life. So I have my badge. They give it back to you in a paperweight. Essentially, it's in a plastic, like in a glass display. So I have that in my office, and it's always a conversation starter. Always, always. Everyone
Yep.
wants to know your stories.
Anyone's walking out of your office, you say, "Hey, I got my eye on you."
Or that, yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. And so we were when we met, you were working with Sonesta, and so did Sonesta pack in the operations, consolidate in Canada?
Yeah, correct. The conversation with Sonesta started during COVID, right before COVID, with Red Lion Hotels, that you might be familiar with as well. And they had reached out and offered me a position for director of franchise operations and quality assurance, which I spent some time with. Was the area director for Choice Hotels Canada for Western Canada before Red Lion approached me, and then of course COVID hit, and everything went dark, and the offer got rescinded, and everything parked. And about a year later, I get contacted from Sonesta Hotels, and my first question was what a lot of people ask is, "Well, who's Sonesta?" Because I hadn't heard of them, to be honest. And they said, "Well, we've purchased Red Lion Hotels. We're trying to launch in Canada now, and we need a vice president there to lead Canada, and a big part of the scope is development." And it was
Mm.
one of those reverse interview. Usually in an interview, you're showcasing your skills and selling your abilities. And I was telling them, I don't know how to do development. I'm an operations person. I've never sold a franchise. I don't know how to do that. And they were telling me, oh, it's just like operations. So I was telling them I don't know how, and they're telling me I can. and it was, and at that time I had started my MBA, and we were coincidentally talking. They were in that culture and HR function about how healthy it is to break out of your comfort zone and to tackle new skills and take new risks. And I thought, but I mean, it had a dual role because Canada demographically is only about the size of a state, as you know, right? There's as many people in most states as there is in all of Canada. So in the United States, that role would be two or three different people. There'd be someone doing development, someone doing operations, and someone doing franchise support. So was doing all three of those things for all of Canada when we met. And then 3 years in, the decision was made to just run Canada from arm's length from the States. But wonderful organization, wonderful company, and some great experiences. Had some great wins. Got the first Sonesta franchise in Canada up and running up at the Calgary airport, and was able to support the corporately operated hotels like in Toronto, where I stayed, where you and I met. And
Oh
um,
yeah.
kudos to you. I don't usually talk about my background the first time or two I met somebody, but you managed to get that going in the suite there at the Blue Jays game. So
Oh man,
Good job.
everywhere I turned, people were like, "Hey, did you talk to Andre? Did you meet him yet?" Yeah, this guy he used to be a police officer. I was like, really? No, no, let me talk. I was like, everyone was talking about you, so I felt like I had to get over there and start asking a million questions and find out. But it was it was a really good event.
Yeah, but during that time, during the transition with Sinesta when they were doing that, and they were one of the was actually on the U.S. side. Someone who's involved at the Post Hotel as an investor pulled me aside and said, "We're doing some work in Canada. We should talk." And said, "Well, that could mean a lot of things. Canada's a big place." But lo and behold, he starts saying the area. That's well, I'm 40 minutes from the Post Hotel, and I've been living on airplanes for the last 3 years. So was open for a conversation. You're as wonderful as that opportunity was. There was a bit of a blessing involved. They kept me around for a few months on a consulting basis, and then the conversation on the Post stood up. But Post Hotel, there's a lot of pride there. I know the founders, um, they were family friends, and they were 40 years and running that hotel. It's two brothers from Switzerland, and they've created this wonderful, wonderful property, the top five wine cellar in North America, top 100 in the world, and it's a luxury hotel with high touch points, part of the Relayan Chateau, and a huge challenge. 200 staff and
Wow.
pacing very well. And anytime you mention it anymore, people know it. So. But they were very candid about the challenges, about some of the brothers retired and sold, and the change. People are always reluctant to change. So, what I'll say is they knew that there was some significant cultural challenges workplace wise, and they also asked the question, how was your police background going to help with um, maneuvering through this and resetting everything there? And
Well, yeah. I mean, I was looking at some of the photos of this place. Is it true that this river or stream runs just right out back? You could just sit out back and just take in nature and the streams coming through.
literally sits on the banks of the Pipestone River in Lake Louise. And if to realize how unique that is, we're in Canada's first national park.
Hmm.
So if you were to approach them now, timing was on someone's side. If you were to approach them now and say, we're going to put this hotel on the riverbank, the government of Canada would laugh you out of the room. And then there's four cabins, including a 5-bedroom house that can sleep 11 literally right on the bank. So you walk out from the hotel and there's this row of cabins that is right, like you walk out and you're sitting, people are sitting enjoying they can reach out and touch that river right from there.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible. And so where would you have to fly into? So is this near Lake Louise? It's
It's right in Lake Louise. So Lake Louise is in itself a very small village. There's not much to Lake Louise, but it's
so you fly
accessible
in.
to. Yeah, you fly to Calgary and then you have about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive. So it's very accessible. Huge international component. And this year, very strong year with US travel, incredibly strong year with US travel because of the exchange you guys are enjoying right now.
Absolutely. Well, going back to so you're running the Sheraton and out of the sense of duty, you finally get your arms around it, 18, 24 months. At what point did you start to say, maybe, maybe I want to be in hospitality for the rest of my career?
I was starting to get bit by that bug while I was there. Interestingly enough, during that time, there was a conference. That we met at the high tech conference. There's two big conferences in Canada every year. There's the CHIC, the Canadian Hotel Investment Conference, and then the Finance and Tech one, ironically, where you and I connected. So I was invited to attend that. I attended that conference to gain some knowledge and was invited to a private dinner held by GE Capital, which is a lender. I'm sure you guys know of GE Capital. And they were trying to land our account, get us from the bank, and during that conference invited me to a reception there. We were also at that time exploring what to do as far as which brand was right for that hotel. So we were at the tail end of the agreement with Sheraton, was 8 years into a 10-year deal.
Hmm.
And we were looking at becoming a DoubleTree Hilton. We were looking at staying Sheraton, looking at to dispose of the asset as a time. So the franchise development person from Hilton was who invited me to this. I don't know if you guys get the show Dragon's Den in the States. Does that Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, any of those?
Oh,
Uh,
okay. We get
that's
Shark
where,
Tank.
yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't
It's
seen
just
the
it's
Dragon's
the
Den.
yeah, shark. Yeah, it's the same concept. People get on the show and try and ask these successful businessmen for money, and they're so one of the people on that show, a guy named Jim Trevelling, was the founder of Boston Pizza, which is a huge pizza chain franchise all across Canada. Ironically, called everyone assumes it's an American company called Boston Pizza, but actually started in Canada. I believe it only exists in Canada, but he is on that show. He's one of the people, and he was at this thing as a speaker, and got introduced to him. Uh, there's no way he remembers me, but how this story ties into your question is that they the person who invited me this introduced me. He said, but Andre, and said, you have something in common. Unbeknownst to me, he started his career as a police officer as well. And said, Jim is an ex police officer. Andre's a police officer on leave. And he said, why are you on leave? And I explained why. Trouble in the just dealing with the family business obligation. Told him just had to push pause to help deal with this problem. And he asked again, why are you on leave? Told him the story again. And I thought, oh, it must be loud in here. And after he had me tell the story the third time, he said, why haven't you just left?
Wow,
I said,
that's
and he goes,
true.
oh, and he said, let me guess. Oh, the guys and the kind. He started talking about the culture of the police, how you feel like you're this family. And he said, the fact that you're here tells me you have other opportunities, other skills than just waiting along for your pension and tell your stories at the end. And he had a very big impact on me because I was struggling with exactly what he was talking about, which I hadn't shared with anybody. And so, my leave had come up. I did go back for a period of time and try and do double duty. And then we ended up, selling the hotel, and the two people who brought Seattle's Best Coffee franchise into Canada were two police officers from the same service I was in, who I knew as well. So I sought their advice. So I was starting to have those conversations and look over the fence a bit and say, what does life look like outside of here? So um, once we sold the hotel and it all ended well, there was through the Hilton connection. Said we're building one of these about an hour north of here. The first Hampton in Canada and central Alberta, actually, the Hampton franchise was just coming to Canada then through Hilton. And I was able to be the first GM of the first Hampton in Alberta, it's right from when it was a grass field, got it built worked with the contractors. And um, since then, that's kind of, I guess, where the launching point was.
Yeah.
Been with brands and management companies since. And the industry's treated me very well. I'll leap ahead a little bit, if that's okay. About September of last year, 6 months ago, my class from training at the police academy had our 25, well, hard to believe I'm saying that out loud, 25-year reunion. And there was only a small number that were still active in it. I'm talking 4 or 5 people. And it was one of those aha moments, all uh, the residuals of staying in that environment too long was very apparent with some of these people, with some of the issues they're having and the way their lives had gone. And I know we're talking on a podcast, so I'll pick my words carefully, but just personal relationships and financial issues and things like that, and who they were as people, right? And things you don't want to become, just negative and broken and skeptical. And then the rest of us that had gone on to other things, everyone was happy and healthy, and marriage is intact and not broke. And so it was just healthy to see that. It was very reaffirming that it was healthy to find that other chapter in life.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine, 25 years in the service, that's got to do a number on you mentally, right? In your soul,
Sure. Well, and
physically for
mental.
sure, but mentally too.
Yeah, and the approach to mental health on that job has changed too. When I got there was a lot of bravada, suck it up, you know, tough it out, and there's still. I make no shame of saying that. Still things I deal with and go talk about, and I encourage anyone on that. I know that's not what this conversation's about, but it does take its toll on people. Those roles.
Yeah. Well, the founder of Boston Pizza was right too. To push you, like, why are you still doing that? Because at that point, if it's still an option and you haven't closed the door, then it's not real. It's like, I could always go back. It's not final. But being forced to make that decision mentally to say, hey, I've moved on. I'm gonna do other things now. That's pretty definitive. It's like truly closing the chapter.
Yeah, and and it's a hard thing to pull yourself away from because you get so absorbed by it. It's just like it's just like it's becomes part of your identity and who you are. And I think people really struggle with breaking that, and they don't do it soon enough. And then when they do, it's too late because they've got one line on the resume and they want to know what else is happening in the world. And I look at the path where hospitality's taken me is launching a U.S. brand in Canada, Giannandrea, and they have connections like this, and ending up at the Post, and it's just been, a lot to be grateful for. A lot of things that would not have happened if I'd stayed there. Master's degree, like none of this would have happened if I'd stayed there. And I didn't see any of that at the time. I was just in this crisis of the mindset of I'm going to clean this up and then go back, and didn't see any of this happening in the future.
Yeah, I mean, having a career in law enforcement too, especially if someone that does like 20 years, there can be a second act. It's like you can do that and then something else. I have a really good friend of mine who's a police captain here in Philadelphia. Tremendous guy, beautiful family, and he's coming up on 20 and thinking, hey, should I stay for 5 more, or what does life have after me? And he hasn't said out loud, do I have the skills? Where could I transition to? But I kind of feel like the world is his oyster. Like he's got everything out in front of him if he wants to go in a certain direction. People think that they're 40 or 45 and, well, what could I do? But there's training schools now. I mean, any type of industry that you would want to get into, on the job training, but also technical training, business ownership. There's so much that's out there. I'm really excited for that. I have an uncle as well who I believe he did 25 years in the Binghamton Police Department in New York State. And you would think, my first thought was like, okay, Uncle Joe's retiring. What's he going to do? He stays busy. His son is a home inspector. So he's now out on the jobs, inspecting the homes, taking certain ones too. He got his certification, and uh, unfortunately does not have the mental health issues. I mean, he when we go visit him, he's the guy that's cooking the pancakes for my kids and always cooking cookies. He bakes, but maybe that is what he's doing. Why he's doing it? Maybe it's therapeutic in that nature. But feel so bad for those who actively see murders. The worst types of policing out there, and have to live with that day in and day out and still manage a family and finances, be part of the extended family as well. Super tough.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of putting it. There can be a second act very easily, which is important because just for your own physical and mental health and just different experiences, and it's just once someone, I think that can say that with serving in any capacity, whether it's military or policing, or some people luck out and come out happy and healthy, and some people have had other experiences. So,
Well, you mentioned to me that the best place to get a dinner in Lake Louise is your mom's house. Is there a specific meal? And I've got to make it up to see you. I would love to. Well, see Lake Louise, see you again, meet the family. Is there a specific dish that she's known for?
well, it's a long list, but she's very well known for her lasagna and for her. And at Easter, it's a bit of a gamut. There's known for how she does her lamb, knows for how she does her pasta that goes with that, knows for the sauces that come with that. So it's difficult and I don't know if she'd like me to narrow down to one. I think she would just like to think that the whole menu is fantastic. So my youngest brother's a professional chef, and it's interesting at those family functions when he comes home because his documentation is recognized all over the world. He's a red sealed chef, but not in her kitchen. So the battle usually takes place in the middle of these family events too. That's
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if the invite still stands, I would love to get out there. My wife and I would, I'm sure, love the area. I would love to join you all for dinner.
Oh, 100% still stands. And we just received, when you're talking about dinner, we just received our Michelin key at the Post Hotel last year and working towards our Michelin recommendation on the dining room because that's what the Post is famous for is its culinary experience. So that was a lot of new experiences,
So
a
I
lot
saw
of,
the Michelin. I saw the
yeah.
Michelin brand on the website, but that you got the Michelin key?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So and Michelin is kind of a unique, again, these are all new experiences. Some of it after years of doing this, you see it's managing the team and dealing with the guests. There's a lot of things that are similar, but then there's a lot of unique nuances too, right? When you're dealing with a luxury brand and things like Michelin and fine
Yeah.
dining and wine.
So what's the process for that? I mean, they contact you, word of mouth, ratings, they come out.
I assume that's what it was coming from the brand because that's how, it's Sonesta and Choice is how we did it. But the thing about Michelin is you don't actually know who they are. There's no way of, they don't make themselves known. Like if you look on on LinkedIn and try find someone from Michelin, you won't. You just
Oh,
have to get, there was a company in Canada a few years ago that got in hot water for hiring investigators to try and find the Michelin people. So it's, it's
wow.
not, you've probably seen it in movies and it's not unlike that where everyone's trying to figure out who they are and is the person at that table from Michelin because they try and pick up on their behaviors and things they do. But they, once they've basically once you've been on their radar for winning other awards and for guest reviews and for putting yourself certain ways, they pay your property a visit. And there's a few different um, designations. Like the Michelin Key speaks to the hotel in general, the whole operation. When you start talking Michelin recommendations, Michelin stars, that's for the culinary, the dining portion specifically.
Incredible. And is that something you're working toward right now is on the dining side?
That's one of our, yeah, we achieved that goal for 20 at the end of 2024. So we're in the Michelin guide as receive the Michelin key, and our goal is to try to get that recommendation followed by that star into the
Fantastic.
dining component. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, I don't often ask every guest this, but something that I am wondering. So, you had the first act, right, with the police department, and now it's a hotelier. If you were to have a third act, if you stopped being the GM of such wonderful and beautiful hotels today, what else could you see yourself doing?
Uh, I think maybe pivoting to something. I mean, you look at demand. I always thought, well, getting back into ownership in hotels would be like because of how he started. I always had my sights set on that. But I look at where the hotel business is going and where the demand in business is going. I think something where I think the third act would have to be something where I could be entrepreneurial and self-employed, but not have to maybe at a different pace. I'm trying, if that makes sense, where I could spend more time on the ski hills and more time at home, even though I'm home more often. So I think the third act would be um, a bit more entrepreneurial, but with a bit of a bit more work-life balance, a bit of a different pace. Maybe own something multi-residential or get involved in something like that where you don't need to be there 8 to 10 hours a day to make it happen.
Is that still what it is? With I mean, 200 employees. That's incredible. So
Well,
you're
we're going into our summer hiring right now, so we'll probably stock up. We'll probably top up that over the next month with another 40, 50 hires and 200 people, and then 10 direct reports to different department heads, and then they have their number twos and their supervisors as kind of the structure there. And of course, the front line is who is really the heart of the hotel, right? So you want to be visible, want to be accessible, and there is a nighttime operation of that. So if you want to do it properly, you're there a lot.
yeah. Yeah, so 200 people in that small of a community. So where are you do you pull people internationally, interns? You got to house them too, or
Everyone, yeah, it's a unique situation. Whereas even in Banff and Canmore, maybe half of your staff will live in, the employers all provide staff accommodation here. It's a very expensive place to live. So uh, hospitality, especially, there's accommodation as part of the deal provided. But in Lake Louise, with a very short, small exception, everyone lives in company provided housing. So that creates an interesting dynamic too. Everyone's working together and everyone's living together. So they leave there and they go to the same apartment building, and then so everyone's socializing together, working together, living in the same building. So
Could be good, but could spin off some drama too, right?
it's wonderful and challenging at the same time. And our recruiting people work with different agencies. Like that's one thing that's pretty cool about the team there is everybody's from somewhere else. You walk around, you look at their name tags, it tells you what country they're from, and half of the hotel, very few name tags say Canada on them. Everyone that's a lot of Australia, a lot of Ukraine, a lot of
Wow.
European countries. It's just anything from people traveling for 6 months to see the country to people who are going to put in a few years.
Unreal. That is incredible, and certainly an extra challenge. What would you say as we start to close here? Maybe two or three more questions. What would you say is the most rewarding part of being a GM at such an iconic property in one of the most beautiful places in the world?
I would have to say the experiences that you create, and from listening to a guest talk about, getting the feedback, talking about we came to Canada and we stayed in this wonderful hotel, and then watching all the moving parts, which is your team, come together to deliver this experience. That it's just great to see what someone tells you. Wow, when you hear that wow factor, and then developing your people. There's nothing better than watching someone show up in an entry level position and then work up to supervisor or work up to management or so the guests and the team would be that's the rewarding part.
That's awesome. I definitely concur. When I was with Sonic Drive-In, and you promoted someone, and months go by and they're completely competent and capable in what they're doing, and you just look over with a little smile and you're like, you got this. You're doing great. That's really rewarding. Awesome.
Yeah, so
Uh,
you've seen that. That's
oh, it's extremely rewarding because I'll say the Gestalt method, right? Like, I often want something for people, and I don't know if they're willing to work for it, if they want it for themselves. But when they're prepared and they have a good attitude and a good work ethic, and you provide them the opportunity and they go out and crush it, I don't think there's anything better than watching them fly.
and and our industry has a lot of certificates and designations you can earn. And I'm able to proctor those exams and help out. So anything like that, where you can watch someone have a hand in someone's growth and development, that's pretty great. That makes the bad days better when you can do something like that.
Yeah. And last week, we are attracting a younger audience as well, those who may be in college, just graduated, looking at their career and kind of their next step. On that note of helping people, get into leadership, can you leave us with any advice that you would give a young person going into hospitality today on how they might be able to navigate and work their way up through the hotels?
Yeah, I would say, attach yourself to an organization that has some growth, like a multi-property or a brand or something with that type of reputation, if you can, and don't be afraid to spend some time as front line in the trenches, and start becoming the type of person you would want to work for. As I would say, when that transition to leadership comes, don't.
Well, thank you, Andre, and thank you, the listeners, for tuning in to this episode of the Moments That Matter podcast. Don't forget, as always, to subscribe and leave us a review. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.